out there, and welcome to C is for Columbia, the only radio broadcast where you will hear raw, unscripted, live reactions from me and Sam about news stories you would not have otherwise heard of. Today, we have a great show for you, and to start us off with our first topic, this is Sam. So take it away, Sam.
Yeah, absolutely. We have talked about primary candidates previously, but this is probably the furthest into the election where we really have any sort of meaningful news. So let's start off with the beginning. Joe Biden and the Democratic Party have confirmed that there are not going to be any primary debates during the Democratic primaries. Bernie Sanders, once seen as his main challenger, has now endorsed him and said that he isn't going to challenge him and he doesn't feel other candidates should challenge him, and mainly because they think the threat of Trump being reelected is such a threat to our democracy that we need to stand behind the president. Bernie Sanders has come under attack for this from a lot of left-wing media. Crystal Ball at Breaking Points has called him a traitor to the political left for not challenging him and saying that we should just back Biden. So, socialists, they have a tendency to purge people that no longer serve the cause. I guess Bernie Sanders is the newest purge on the American left, once seen as the main force of socialism in North America, now is being called a traitor for not challenging Biden and actually going as far as endorse Joe Biden. And Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders have been contentious in the past, but when it comes to being reelected, Bernie Sanders does support President Biden's reelection efforts. The Democratic Party is not going to have any debates, which, would make it seem that it's going to be difficult for a meaningful challenge to Joe Biden, as so much of the exposure really does come from those primary debates. And at this time, we're seeing that there will be no debates of any kind. And, many people feel as though Biden is being handed the, not re-election, but in terms of being the standard bearer for the Democratic Party. Biden is the oldest president I believe we've had, and he's going to be in his mid to late 80s at the end of his second term. Would he be reelected? And this has caused a lot of concern, partly because some people on the political left feel that Joe Biden's too moderate, but also a lot of other people are saying that Joe Biden's too old. There's overwhelming polling data showing that a majority of Americans don't want Biden or Trump on the ticket, but it seems that that very well may be the next election in 2024, just simply a repeat of 2020. In terms of the people that are challenging Joe Biden, haven't really heard much from Howard Stern, as we had mentioned on a previous podcast, as a potential challenge. But what we have heard is Kennedy, Robert Kennedy's son, is surging in the polls now with about 14%, and Marianne Williamson, a 2020 presidential hopeful, who went on to endorse Bernie Sanders, has also entered the race. Their popularity is increasing right now. But I guess a few talking points. I mean, one, without the debates, how much headway can these candidates, go ahead and gain without that kind of exposure? Are they going to be taken seriously? Are they going to have a chance to really establish themselves? I'm not really sure that Marianne Williamson has a credibility problem in terms of her actual stances. She seems to be a progressive Democrat from what I can tell, but she also doesn't necessarily have the resume that some people would look for in a serious presidential candidate. So it will be interesting, I think, to see if either of these candidates, or maybe another candidate that we haven't heard of, is able to break any ground in terms of the Democratic primaries. But it seems that the establishment wing of the Democratic Party has basically decided that Joe Biden is going to be the candidate in the 2024 election. Ted, what do you think about all this? Do you think that Biden should run? How seriously do you take the declared candidates at this time? And what does this mean for Democratic politics going into the next year?
So leading off of that, I would want to know a little bit of information. As far as an incumbent president, I mean, Biden is the incumbent. Is it at all unusual for the party housing the president in office, whose party is greased in office. Is it unusual for them to not have a debate?
I wouldn't say it's unusual. I mean, Obama didn't really have any major opposition when he ran again in 2012. I think in this case, though, it's kind of a unique circumstance. What's interesting about this to me, it's not just about the fact that the Democrats don't want to have any debates, which for an incumbent president could be predictable, but I think it also shows. Does this mean that Joe Biden is a weak incumbent? Does the fact that there's this much of a push to have debates and you have two candidates surging right now in the polls? I mean, what does this? I guess part of my question was also, what does this mean for 2024? To give a little history, the last time something like this happened in the Democratic Party was in 1980, where Ted Kennedy actually did challenge Jimmy Carter for the slot in the 1980 election. Kennedy didn't get very far, and now there's another Kennedy,
Right.
the nephew of that Kennedy, running in this election. But you know what, though? It showed a lot about how unpopular and weak Jimmy Carter was, and he ended up losing in one of the bigger landslides in history to Ronald Reagan. So, with not invoking Trump too much, I do think, though, that the mindset is if the opposing candidate is Trump, then Biden will be a sure deal, and we don't really need to have a debate or really a formal primary process. But I mean, you do have to think, though, this when you have polls showing that nobody really wants Biden to run again, and despite being an incumbent, you have several candidates who are at least making a pretty significant splash. I'm seeing polling up to like 14%. That's really not too shabby when you're running against an incumbent president, I don't think. I mean, I just wonder like what this means for Joe Biden in terms of him getting reelected. I mean, this isn't really much of a changed election from an outsider's perspective. And I guess what I would also say is the other point I was kind of making before is that whether or not like it makes sense for the Democrats to have a debate, how seriously should we be taking Kennedy and how seriously should we be taking Williamson? Are they formidable foes or are they just, Hail Mary candidates that want their 15 minutes of fame?
Right. I certainly don't think Williamson, based on how she rolled out her campaign, is at all expecting to do well, for one. When it comes to Kennedy, I'm not as confident in saying that. I don't know what he expects to get out of it. But I do think that with Williamson, and looking at how she polls, you mentioned she's surging in the polls. Last I looked, she was not. I mean, she was maybe ticking up a few points, but that's only in the 10 to 12 range anyway. So I don't think that she is, one, expecting to do much as far as pushing Biden out. Now, let's say Biden has a health catastrophe or for whatever reason has to drop out. Those early candidates, Williamson and Kennedy, I don't think that they would necessarily even have a better shot at the nomination, assuming Biden drops, because they announced early. I think rather Williamson and Kennedy are trying to pull perhaps independent voters. It could be a number of them, but disillusioned voters certainly towards the Democratic Party in general. I think that Williamson, she has a more sort of a Bernie Sanders-like base about her. And I think that she's probably trying to access and sort of activate that base towards the Democratic Party in general. Interesting that you say Bernie has claimed he will not be running at all. That I had not heard, and that kind of surprises me, to be honest. I thought he would make some sort of showing, at least. With Biden announcing, perhaps he said he doesn't want to fracture the party more, which I suppose is understandable. Do you know, did he wait until Biden announced before he said that? Do you know?
So this was the official statement, but from what I do remember in, just following the 2020 election, he had expressed before that he wasn't. Well, here's what Bernie Sanders said: I'll run for president again if Joe Biden doesn't run. But
Okay.
he did at times, while it might not have been like as official of a statement of this, he did state in the past that he was going to not challenge Biden and he would be interested in running potentially because there was kind of talk that Biden would deliberately be a one-term president. I think those are mostly rumors and I don't know how well now it doesn't really seem genuine at all because he's running again, but
Right.
it's unclear if that was maybe just kind of a campaign pitch that like, hey, you'll only have to vote for me once, don't worry about it. But with elections, all of that stuff's so unclear and so many things are said.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Things change.
Not to get too off topic, but one interesting thing about Kennedy is he is married to Cheryl Hines from Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Oh, wow.
So, I wonder what this will mean for Curb Your Enthusiasm if she becomes the first lady. Kind of a minor, more amusing point, but I just think it's kind of funny that he's married to Cheryl Hines.
I haven't seen Curb Your Enthusiasm in ages.
Yeah, me either. But going back to kind of the candidates, though. So, yeah, there was a huge reaction because I do watch a lot of different media, including a lot of left-wing media. I like to consume a lot of different political media to kind of understand what's going on.
So we don't have to.
Yeah, pretty much. And I have seen some really strong reactions, not just about Biden running again, but people on the left feeling betrayed by Bernie Sanders. It's amazing how the times have changed. Does this mean Bernie Sanders is an establishment Democrat now? Because a lot of people were really upset and they viewed this as a huge betrayal that Bernie Sanders not only wouldn't run again, which maybe considering his age would be understandable, but that he would endorse Joe Biden. That was a huge stab in the back in the opinion of a lot of people on the political left. So it's interesting to see how perceptions can change over time.
Sure. Bernie has been around the block a lot. And he might be looking at, in 2016, he probably saw a lot of opportunity to make a real go for it. And in 2020, following a Trump presidency, he probably saw a lot of opportunity. And actually, if I remember right, in the primaries, at the beginning of the primaries, Bernie was doing pretty well. He was doing a lot better than he did in 16 in 2020 at the beginning of the primaries until some of those less blue states.
South Carolina, mainly.
Yeah,
South
Carolinas.
Carolina.
And until the Carolinas started coming in. But I think perhaps he actually sees, he's got a lot of experience. He probably sees that there's not as much opportunity this go around for him specifically, given that there's a Democratic incumbent president who is running again. And I think that, and I'll go back to saying this, the only real reason that a Democrat would make a run for it is if they think that Biden will have a health catastrophe or pass away or resign or something to that effect where he is no longer eligible for the office. That's the only reason that a Democrat might run, or to try to make a pitch towards independence, to try to kind of massage Biden's pitch towards independence, perhaps. You know what I'm saying? Like if there's a candidate with enough grassroots momentum within the Democratic Party, perhaps Biden will start to pivot and start to cater to those voters, if that exists. And I guess the way that you find out if that exists is by sending out feelers like these smaller candidates to see what is their appeal. I do think that the mantra that Biden is either too old or too incompetent to hold office at this point, that will be a factor in attacking him, as it has been. It seems like the past 2 to 3 cycles, at least since 2016, there's a focus on what are the disqualifiers. How can I argue that my opponent, basically, is a disqualifiable candidate, not for policy, not for what they are arguing they want to do, but in principle, as the president, what disqualifies them as the president, and I will focus on that, be it their age or, I mean, in 2016, Trump focused very heavily on Hillary Clinton's criminal behavior as her disqualifier. There was a lot of focus on Trump's disqualifying behavior, sexual assault allegations, financial problems, not showing his tax returns, disqualifying behavior. And in fact, Trump also argued that Cruz was he should be disqualified, which was his largest opponent in the Republican primaries in 2016. That Cruz should be disqualified because he was born outside the United States, and that disqualified him. That wasn't necessarily a truthful disqualification. But my point being that all these disqualifiers are going to be focused on and hit hard on. And so, yeah, Biden being too old, that's one of his disqualifiers. That has nothing really to do with his policy, nothing really to do with how he served in principle, what are the outcomes of his service, but rather something about him that just we should kick him out of office because of this quality about him. And I think that's kind of sad. Like, that's just, now that's kind of the political, the point of lowest energy is that we poke at people's inherent flaws, whatever their inherent flaws, rather than looking at, what potential they bring to the table and what they've done in office. In the case of Biden, what he's done in office in the last 4 years. And maybe I hate what he's done in the last 4 years, but simply poking at him because he's old and kind of dawdly seems unfortunate to me. But that being said, I think it's still a foregone conclusion. It will be Biden v. Trump for the general election, regardless of what happens in the primaries.
Yeah, I think so as well. 2020, I worked on that election. I worked 6 to 7 days a week on that election. And, I just remember us going to bed not being too sure who the president was going to be. And, just going through this, it's been quite a journey. We've had President Biden. He's not a new president anymore. We've had him for most of a first term at this point. And, he never really won over. I always thought maybe there would be a point
right
in the presidency where maybe Biden starts as a weak president and then he does something to kind of win people over, to make people feel like, he's our guy. But truthfully, Biden has been a placeholder president. Progressives who didn't think he was left-wing enough voted for him because they didn't want Trump.
Yeah, for
Independents who weren't really inspired by him voted for him because the other option was Trump. He's just basically been a placeholder president. Like, let's say he gets reelected, which he very well may. Biden could realistically, I'm not going to make an election prediction in May of 2023, but he could be the president for 2 full terms, potentially all 8 years. Is he just going to be remembered as this guy we all sort of just put up with because we were scared to death that we'd have another 4 years of Trump? Is that really going? I mean, what an interesting legacy. All of these other presidents, they've been dynamic in some sort of way. They've been known for something, pretty significant. Bush in the war on terror, Obama, and, passing a healthcare bill, not to mention wearing a tan suit, which was a big deal at the time. And so on and so forth. Biden might end up serving for 8 years, but he might just end up being remembered as this placeholder president who wasn't really known for anything that significant, nothing that really defines his legacy. One of the things he said in 2020 was that nothing will fundamentally change. We went from hope and change to nothing will fundamentally change in a pretty short period of time. So, hey, maybe he'll win. I think it's possible we could have 8 years of Biden. I don't think that's off the table at all. But what a weird legacy for a president. I've never experienced something like this in all of my, taking history classes and studying. presidential
Yep.
politics. I've never seen a president with this kind of legacy of just, hey, at least I'm not the guy I ran against twice.
Yeah, he's kind of just holding down the fort in while we figure something else out so that Trump doesn't have to be in there.
Moving beyond the election, there's been some reporting, speaking of people who were considered heroes of the political left. There's been documents that come out that show that Noam Chomsky, left wing theorist, is known for books such as Manufacturing Consent, and, just an icon, especially among a lot of these Bernie Sanders types of people, was on an airplane with Jerry Epstein and Woody Allen. And when Chomsky was contacted about this, he basically just said, it's none of your you know what business. And it's not a big deal that I was on an airplane having a dinner with, a talented artist like Woody Allen. Now, in fairness, we don't really know what Chomsky was doing. Epstein had made a lot of financial contributions to MIT. And we don't necessarily know like how dirty Noam Chomsky's hands are in this factor, but it just amazes me even years after, all of this was supposedly settled, there's just more and more coming out. Noam Chomsky is considered this far left, distinguished academic, untouchable intellectual, and now his legacy might be permanently tarnished, and he's not really doing anything to try to help himself other than telling people that it's none of your business why I was on that airplane. I'm kind of free. I'm kind of free-handing this because there's only so much information that's come out recently about this, but it's just interesting to me. First Bernie Sanders is getting purged, and now Noam Chomsky is getting purged. It's just, the political left is kind of taking some hits here in terms of their heroes.
That's interesting. I hadn't put that together, that there are some recent, like you said, heroes, kind of these large figureheads that people on the left looked up to, getting kind of pushed out in a way. I mean, particularly with Bernie, if he's getting pushed out by his lefty compatriots over there. And if Chomsky, it sounds like the details are really vague about that. And Epstein dealt in a lot of different businesses, so there's nothing to say that because Epstein and Woody Allen were up in a plane with him, that anything necessarily transpired. It is unfortunate that Chomsky said, none of your business, trying to shut it down. Maybe he's trying to keep at bay other rumors that would get out that could be damaging. Or he's just upset at the allegations in general, and he doesn't want to deal with it because especially if the allegations have no merit, if they're not true, and it's just, oh, you associated with Epstein, therefore you must be a predator, therefore you must be a pedophile. That doesn't seem like, it really doesn't seem like there's enough information to go off of there. But if people are feeling disillusioned regarding Chomsky, that's a shame because he is looked up to by a lot of people. Almost a modern 20th century Marx in a way. I mean, he really retold a lot of left-wing philosophy and repainted a picture for modern progressivism. So that's unfortunate.
Well, I guess it just shows you don't really know somebody until you really know them, and I guess it just kind of tie all of this together. The progressive left right now, I mean, the biggest person they really have is Marianne Williamson, who I have nothing against her personally. I just don't know that this is going to be the next president of the United States.
No, there's no energy for her. I mean, and that's what I said earlier. I don't think there's any energy in her direction. Even forget Biden for like a second. Pretend Biden doesn't run. I don't think there's any energy surrounding her whatsoever. The Bernie Sanders group did not rally around her. From what I can tell, her numbers don't show that. And they didn't when she was first coming out as a candidate. So I think she's dead in the water, personally.
I do too. And like speaking of perching, you could even go back to like Elizabeth Warren used to be a hero on the left, and now a lot of these
Yeah.
people treat her the way they treat Hillary Clinton, who isn't exactly a beloved figure by the left or really anyone. But
Yeah, I mean, Warren kind of sold out a lot of the progressive side of the left wing. She kind of became a middle of the road left winger, or not even left winger, a middle of the road Democrat, for the sake of maintaining her uh, power within the party, I think, or her position within the party. You know,
yeah,
as a bit of a figurehead.
yeah, and I think the final point I'd kind of make as we kind of come, maybe not quite to the end yet, but towards the end of this episode, is, the reason why I kind of tied all of this together is because I guess what I would kind of ask is what's the future of the political left, especially in terms of presidential politics? The person that comes to mind, and I think we've talked about her on the show before, is AOC. But she's hasn't really seemed like she really wants to run for president. She even admitted that she initially didn't want to run for re-election.
AOC to me is a future Pelosi. That's how I see AOC. She's gonna be in the House for her career if her career holds. But I don't think she's gonna get out of the House. I don't think she's gonna get into the Senate. I don't think she's gonna get into presidential politics. Just based on how she attracts her voting base and how she runs herself. She is an outlier, and she wants to be an outlier, and that can be a good thing. You know, that can maintain a career like Pelosi did. Pelosi ended up dominating her district for a long period of time, and AOC could also do that. But I don't think that she's going to ever have widespread appeal. Not enough to get in the Senate, not enough to get a bid for the presidency. But what she could become is Speaker of the House one day. You know, that's what I sort of see. And I think that AOC knows this. And I think that her and Pelosi, they get into it a lot. But I think AOC, when she looks at Pelosi, is really looking at a mirror. And I think that Pelosi feels the same way.
Yeah, you've expressed that before, and I kind of agree. Like the thing about like these congressional candidates, especially like AOC is in New York and Pelosi's in California, you really just have this small contingent that you can appeal to. Presidential politics are really about building coalitions, and what I would say for AOC is if she wants to be a political candidate, she's going to have to build stronger coalitions and reach across the aisle. But that doesn't really seem to be how she wants to brand herself. No, she wants to be a darling of the political left. And, like you said, she could still get a great career in Congress out of that and potentially be Speaker of the House, especially as millennials get older and they kind of become the standard bearer for the time being. So that's basically what I would say about that. It's unclear what direction the political left is going to move on from after
What's
Bernie
left of the
Sanders.
left?
What's left of the left? Well, new people get elected all the time, and I guess we'll,
Yep.
hopefully we'll be covering this for several more years, and we'll follow along and report back.
And that's how I feel too. Like, things will change. I believe there was a similar sentiment on the left, circa maybe 2014, 2015, and then Bernie showed up as a presidential candidate, and everyone rallied around him. Everyone on the left did. And the discourse kind of got filtered out to the point where Bernie became the primary harbinger of left-wing politics for a while. And I think that can happen again. Will it succeed or not? Specifically in the presidency? I don't know. I guess that's the answer. Like, will there be another left-wing candidate like Bernie that can actually get in? I don't know. But yeah, if that is a possibility, you can be sure to hear about it right here on C is for Columbia. This is the podcast where we cover the issues you may not even know you want to hear about, but we still cover them and we have a good time. All right, everyone. We'll see you later.